What is synchrony?
Synchrony is when things run into time. So they start to sync up, they start to follow the same patterns, and it can be movement, it can be emotion, it can be behavior, but things sort of start to move into the same rhythm.
So how does that work within people?
Within people, it's really interesting because it starts to work immediately as we have a conversation between our eye contact and the things that we're talking about. Our bodies start to fall into time together. So heartbeats might start to align, pupils dilate in the same moment, and our brainwaves also start to fall into the same types of patterns.
Sounds like you're describing like rhythm, like the way dancers all kind of need to move in time together. When they don't, it just like looks off.
Mm-hmm. And marching, that's actually part of why marching is a part of military actions, because it helps to get soldiers into sort of one flow together. But dancing, I think it's interesting because it's so much a part of our culture and our way of being. If you think about it, we have so many traditional dances and songs. It's like natural for humans to look for synchronizing with one another.
When we had our first conversation, I went down this rabbit hole of looking into interbrain synchrony, the difference between synchrony and synchronicity, which is now really clear to me, and a whole bunch of other things. And we're going to go down this rabbit hole together today, but I want you to start us off at the easiest place. If I was a 5-year-old, right, how would you explain how our brains work together?
Well, when we are interacting with each other, with our environment, when we're thinking about specific things, different regions of the brain activate in those moments. So if we start to do something together, maybe the same regions of the brain will start to activate in the same types of moments. So yeah, it's that our brains will start to function the same way. And there's regions of the brain. So you could have like the front of the brain starts to, I'm talking 5-year-old, front of the brain starts to light up if we're looking at it with machines, and so does yours. But you also have brain waves that are happening. So as we're thinking and moving and doing things, different types of brain waves start to activate, and maybe the same brain waves that are activating for me will start to activate for you.
Why does that matter? Like, okay, our brains are syncing up. So multiple brains are all syncing up and syncing together. Why? Like, why does that happen?
Why does it happen? That's a good question. I think that there's probably an evolutionary or biological imperative that's a benefit for us as humans. Cooperation is part of our survival strategy. So when we start to sync up, we see that other things happen as well. We might start to empathize more with one another. We can cooperate with more ease. So there's a reason that can help us as a species continue to survive and thrive.
And this syncing up of multiple brains helps us get better results. Like it's doing that. It's giving us that survival edge or something. Like what's it giving us?
I mean, if it were that easy, you could put a whole bunch of world leaders in a room and hope that they come out with a consensus. And that's not what we see.
Okay.
Unfortunately. But there's an interesting amount of research right now where it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg question. So do we synchronize because we're already more similar with each other and it's easier for us to start to align? Or do we synchronize because we're working on a specific task or a shared goal together? And the research shows both sides. So you could see like with mothers and children or with people in a romantic partnership, they'll synchronize much more quickly than you would see with two strangers. But if you put two strangers in a room and you get them working on the same task together, you'll also see that they begin to synchronize. And the outcomes, there's an association. So I think the research is quite new and we're still learning a lot, but there are a lot of associations with better outcomes. So more collaboration means better task results.
So it sounds like a self-fulfilling positive cycle of reinforcement. We build some kind of connection and bond, and then as a result, we work together better. while working together better, our brains are now getting more used to syncing up. Then the bond gets stronger, then we get better at working together, and on it goes.
Yes, that's the hope.
Is there a way of speeding this up? Like, so you mentioned, people who are already with each other quite a bit, right? Like a parent and child. Maybe using the example I just gave, we could say like co-founders of a business or something. Like people who are really used to working together and they've built a really strong connection. Is there a way of speeding that up? So like, let's say I'm meeting a total stranger. What can I do so that our brains synchronize faster so that we can get better results faster?
So from your own perspective, like your own choices that you make, you can maintain better eye contact.
Okay.
Mimicry can help, which you also have to, of course, not make it creepy. Like I'm not going to sit here and start copying you, but subtle mimicry, interacting and engaging, like showing that you're interested in the conversation, the head nods we do, and those kinds of things. Those are small, subtle things that can start to help. But you can also put a shared goal on the table. So set the scene with whatever it is that you need to be working on. Like, this is our objective today. And if you can make it something that has an emotional connection. So not just like by the end of the day, we need to check off the list that we have made a plan for our business. But if you can add a type of purpose to it that's a bit more emotionally resonant for the two of you, and you both feel engaged in that shared purpose, it'll help you to move into that rhythm quickly.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the show, or back to the show for those of you who aren't new here. Getting lots of new faces these days, and so I just wanted to take a quick sec to introduce myself. Hey, I'm Seven, and also to give you a quick announcement. As a little bit of background, this show used to be very focused on what it meant to be a leader, but I quickly realized I already had my answer, which is that I believe you already are one. And it's just about becoming more of that person you want to be. So we're talking about the world, self-leadership, personal development, humanity, discovery, self-discovery, and so much more. This is a place where deep conversations happen in a way that helps you become more of that person you want to be. And so if you appreciate that and you want to help us grow, and I know you're tired of people hearing, we've been hearing this for over a decade, like and subscribe and share the episode, and I get it, but look, it is genuinely the biggest and best thing you can do. I don't play ads or any crap like that. I do this and take this time to say thank you because I appreciate you and where this show is going. Thank you so much for being a part of it. Lots of love, and let's get on with the episode. There's a level of coldness and anxiousness as well. Two very different things, and maybe other things as well that equally have, I think, an effect on separating each other. Mm-hmm. People are more afraid of each other, almost of building those bonds. Like when I think about the way people interact here in London, London is such a cold place, right? I know you're traveling and visiting here right now. London, it can be such a cold place, and there's such high levels of separateness and anxiety, and especially amongst younger people as well, I notice. And this, in the same way you can have that positive cycle, you can also have a destructive cycle where people are afraid of others, they don't build those bonds, and their brains don't synchronize with others, so then they don't build those bonds, on and on and on. And then I wonder, okay, what are the long-term implications? Because anywhere in nature, use it or you lose it, right? So can we lose the ability to synchronize with other brains?
That's a scary question. I think that the capability is there. I mean, for us to actually lose it would take quite a long time of evolutionary processes, I think. But from a social perspective, our usage of phones has had a big shift in this arena.
Like what?
Well, the fact that, you sit in a coffee shop and maybe in the past, I don't know, maybe I'm idealizing, but you don't have your phone, you don't have your laptop, maybe you have a book, and it's easier to strike up a conversation between people. But if everyone is just here and they are looking down and they're not even in tune to the environment and the world around them, they're removing the awareness that they could ever synchronize with somebody. So I think that that's been a big part of the shift. I think COVID had an interesting shift too, because all of a sudden we were just in complete isolation. And I know a lot of people who struggled to come out of that in a way. You have your social butterflies who were, came out of it. It was like, oh, thank goodness, finally I can actually see people again. But you have other people who sort of stayed a little bit more in hermit mode and comfortable being alone. So the question, can we lose it? We absolutely can lose the sense of ease we have, but biologically, I think we can easily get it back if we start to focus on it and tune in again.
Okay, so let's say I'm someone who's chronically on social media. I live in a city that's big enough, such as London, as an example, where we are now, where there's enough people that you almost become deaf to the existence of people, deaf and blind to the existence that everyone behind the flesh sack that is the human body, there's a whole person and a whole life back there. And I'm really desensitized to things. I'm not used to talking to other people. When they come up and talk to me or I need to talk to them, there's a little twinge of like anxiety or kind of my heart races a bit or something. What's step one to overcoming this like self-perpetuating issue?
I have that too.
Okay. So what's step one for you then?
For me, it's repetition in a way. And there's some interesting studies about this too, about how us interacting with strangers actually impacts our day. So there, and I can find it I don't remember the names of the researchers, but they had people, I think it was for a month, intentionally interact with people in their day that they wouldn't normally interact with. So say at the grocery store with the cashier, rather than just, okay, here, pay, move on to the next thing, actually making a comment to them. And maybe they had that little pitter patter of the heart. But when you start to do it every day and you see, well, nothing bad happened, and actually I left that moment with a smile on my face, it helps to reduce that sense of anxiousness when you start to interact with somebody new.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Right. And how much do I need to repeat doing this?
I don't know. I think as much as you feel is natural and comfortable, or pushing yourself beyond what feels natural and comfortable. And then that will slowly start to shift.
Okay. Because I think that is the challenge, right? It's like, this is never comfortable for me. I never like this. I don't want to do that, right? And it's so easy to not, because we're on the phones, right? I don't need to talk to you to get my groceries. I can have them delivered to me for whatever. So it's just so easy to tap out of being a human being in a human world.
Yeah. And this is not new either. Like it's easy to blame phones, but I can think about there's this movie that I really love. It's one of my favorite movies ever. It's called Waking Life.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
No.
And it's basically a series of mini philosophical and scientific conversations that are animated. So you have a different style of animation.
So podcasting before it was cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's little snippets of life with one subtle overarching story. And there's this one moment, and this was back, I think it came out in the year 2000. So phones were becoming a thing, but they weren't yet.
Smartphones
were still a few years away. And so these people are, one's going down the steps of the subway and one's coming up, and they bump shoulders. And the woman goes, "Hey, can we do that again?" And the guy's like, "What? Why would we do that again?" And she's like, "I don't want to be an ant. I don't want to be just like bouncing off of each other and going on autopilot everywhere we go." So I think it's sort of an awareness and a choice. And you don't necessarily have to make it that all day, every day, you're synchronizing with every person you meet. That's also not natural. But to find the joy in it, in those little moments where it can make a difference for you in your day and probably for that person too, I think it helps.
What are some of the impact on our personal lives of getting better at flexing this muscle? I was going to say getting better at this, but like we're not getting better at synchrony really, so much as our brains are getting more used to being comfortable with other people. Like in a way, what you started describing is just like living in a society, or like being a social creature, which we are. We're social beings. We don't act like it a lot of the time now, but we are social beings.
Yeah.
So when I say getting better at this, I think I just mean getting better at operating as a social being again and rediscovering your social self.
Mm-hmm.
But so anyway, personally then, what are the impacts of our personal life at getting better at flexing our synchrony muscles?
More joy in the everyday. A lot of people, so in that study I was mentioning where people were forced for the sense of research to have more interactions, the outcomes was that they had more joy in their day-to-day life. And since it is something so innate to us and it's easy to avoid, and we're sort of forming habits that make us avoid it, tapping back into it can help rediscover this little light when you share a smile with somebody or you have a little bit of an interaction. But it's also, it doesn't necessarily have to be with strangers at large, but it can also just be a new type of focus and intentionality in the relationships you have in your life, whether it be, close relationships or with coworkers. Just focusing on it and being a little bit more intentional about it, it brings a sense of satisfaction to people.
And then you started to talk about coworkers. So professionally, what happens in a workplace or a workspace or within a team? What are the impacts there?
Well, that's it's a broad question, and it's interesting. I have a friend who's doing some research in this area where he's looking at how people are interacting and connecting in an office space, and seeing a lot of what you were talking about, that people actually come in almost like with horse blinders on. It's like, okay, I go to my cubicle, leave me alone. I'm here. I'm focused on my thing. Even people in co-working offices, you think that tends to be kind of a social space.
Actually, no, it's worse. My experience is exactly what you're describing.
Really?
Yeah, because I'm not here to socialize. I'm here to get work done outside of my house. And we don't know each other. Whereas when you've got a colleague, it's like, well, we have a reason to talk to each other because we're going to be in the same team meetings or whatever. Yeah. So even that's a reason. But yeah, when I'm in a co-working space, it's like, no one talks to each other unless that's a specifically crafted environment. Maybe there's a sense of community or events that go on or whatever, but most of the time, no.
But that's one of the keys. Okay. So if that's something you're seeking, then look for a place that offers community, and you can intentionally try to build that. So within the context of a company, you can do the same thing. But I think in a company situation, when you're wanting to try to facilitate more synchrony between people with hopefully the outcomes of better collaboration and more teamwork, having some type of a shared purpose for everybody in the company helps to facilitate that and bring more ease to the process. And the outcome should be that people are more on the same page. You have a bit more of a bit less of a cost, like an energetic cost, when you step into a meeting room together to work on something, because you're already partially aligned at this higher level of having a shared purpose. So then when you step into the meeting, it's easier to move into getting the work done together and move into group flow. That's another one of the really interesting things about getting people to synchronize at work.
What's group flow?
Group flow is when people, the state of flow, if you think of it on an individual level, you're working on something and you almost lose a sense of time because you're just really tuned in. You get into this productive mode, and you can achieve that at a group level as well. So if you're problem solving anything or you're moving into some type of creative session to achieve that group flow, you can really boost the creativity, boost the efficiency. So it can also make it just a nice and more enjoyable experience for everybody. And so they'll want to keep coming back, and they'll bring that energy when they come back into the room because they're looking forward to it.
It's so interesting when even just the term group flow, that when we talk about flow, we're pretty much only ever talking about the self, right? My flow, I in a state of flow. And we live in such what I call a hyper-individualistic society. So it's not just individualism. It's like we're all just here for ourselves primarily.
Yeah.
And as a result, I'm only thinking about this now. It's like, oh, we only ever talk about flow for ourselves, but actually a whole group can be in flow. Like when you're in a great brainstorming session with your team, or you and your friends are solving a really important or interesting problem or something like that together, it's like, oh, like we're in movement, there's energy, and that energy bounces. And it's interesting you talk about group flow. I have a little theory that I mentioned. I went down a rabbit hole thinking about this. So I started looking into synchrony when we had our first chat offline or online before the podcast recording some weeks ago. And I started to learn about interbrain synchrony, which is what we've been talking about, where multiple brains sync together, and then started to compare this to what happens on the brainwave level.
Mm-hmm.
So someone like Joe Dispenza, for example, if you're familiar with him and his work, he'll talk about high beta, low beta, alpha, etc. And I started going on this rabbit hole of what brainwave states help improve synchrony and in what environments.
Mm-hmm.
So my current theory is that low beta as opposed to high beta. So high beta is very, very noisy. Low beta is you're still in beta, but it's not so noisy, which means you're able to take in more information and go outside of your body a little more, which means theoretically that's great for group work.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas alpha, I think, would be great for independent work, i.e., I'm wondering if low beta is useful for group sync, for interbrain synchrony, and for group flow. And if alpha brainwaves are the most useful state to be in for self-work, independent work, and flow within whatever you're focusing on yourself. I started going down this rabbit hole of like, what will help our brains synchronize? Because if I'm even a little bit right, and when I'm in a group, I want to be in low beta, we all want to be in low beta together, then we need to create a space in which we can all be in that place where our phones are away, we're not so stressed, we're not moving into high beta, but we're still very present with lots of other people, but maybe not too present, so the ideas can still flow almost.
Right.
I don't know, but it's this like little rabbit hole I went down looking into synchrony and thinking like, how do we use this tool?
That's a really interesting rabbit hole. I haven't done that rabbit hole yet. I think that with the different types of waves, it also depends on what you're trying to achieve, what kind of experience, or what is it that your group needs in order to accomplish it. So in terms of which waves are best to tap into that state of flow, I'm not sure. I'd have to do the same rabbit hole, which I will do now after this conversation. But when I started studying synchrony, one of my favorite papers on this, I do remember the name, it's Feldman and Levy. They did this paper a research project where they actually brought together adolescents from Palestine and Israel to take part in an 8-week intervention that was around, reducing hatred, really. I mean, it's the most desynchronized you can possibly be, I think. And they looked at alpha waves, but they were looking at it in the context of building empathy. So I think that it really depends on what it is you're trying to achieve with the group.
What did they find? So when there's low empathy, you're more into alpha or you're less into alpha?
It's that when, okay, hold on. I think the alpha wave, I have to double check it. If I remember correctly, it was a while ago that I read it.
Citation needed.
Yeah, I'll put the citation and we'll correct it, or you can put a caption if I say this wrong. If I remember correctly, the alpha wave activity shows that you are empathizing.
Okay.
So it shows, and of course, I mean, we're still studying all of this, and
that would blow a bit of a hole in my theory. Well, maybe not a huge hole,
but that's why I say it depends on what you're trying to achieve. Because here, they weren't trying to get them to co-create. So if you're looking for a co-creation state, maybe the beta is the better. So I'm not disproving your theory. I think it's still really interesting to look at. And they were looking, though, to get people on the same wavelength in terms of empathizing with one another. So if I remember correctly, the alpha wave activity is when you are more in an empathetic state.
Please do send that to me. I'm going to make a note to get that from you, because I'm putting all this together into like a little body of work. Like I'm really interested in how we craft the most useful spaces possible for different things. If you're going into a company, for example, and you want to improve the company culture, the question is not what is the one thing we do. The question is, what is the context and what can we train everyone to be able to create in those contexts? A team leader needs to be able to hold space in different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve. Empathy, now that's a different space or maybe slightly altered space. I'm going to do independent work, and okay, what do we teach everyone to be able to do for themselves so that they're not caught in like the stress of high beta or whatever. So yeah, I'm going to make a note. Please do send that to me. That's so cool.
And what they saw in that one was that the interventions they did help. So in the beginning, what they would do is they would watch the wave activity when they were showing stimuli of people within their group. So if they're Israeli, they would see pictures of people who are also Israeli, and then they would see people who are Palestinian. And they would, in the beginning, suppress that empathetic state. So it's like halting it. And you could see then between the control group, who didn't go into any of the interventions, and the 8-week intervention group, that by the end of things, they were no longer suppressing that empathetic state when they were shown the other group. And then there was a lot more. It wasn't just looking at the brainwaves. They also had conversations, but they were able to show that they tackled it from many angles, though. So you can't say that it was necessarily this one thing that they did. Yeah. I think that can be taken too when you're thinking about the different wave states. It might depend on what it is that you're looking to achieve in that moment. And you're not just always going to want to go into one type of flow, but depending on what you're working on, you may need to tap into different areas and sort of throw a lot of synchronizing methods at it to see, because what works for me and gets me synchronizing with you may be slightly different for somebody else who's in the room. So you can sort of give people different angles to move into that.
What are some of those big pieces that one would need to work on, right? So what are some of those like core different things that are the different pieces of this puzzle? Obviously, as human beings, we're complex. We need this conversation, this like psychologically safe space, this other support given, these questions asked, and that's all in this context, and that context is different. But what are some of the biggest things that I can learn to do either for myself or for others to create that result you were just describing?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's some sort of, I don't want to call them superficial things, but things that feel easy to integrate, but also maybe a little unexpected. Okay. So one is movement, because I mentioned you can synchronize physiologically, behaviorally, and emotionally. So you can start off by just having people get up and stretch at the same time. Just even like sitting and standing. Some of these physiological in sync moments start to help tune the brainwaves into one another as well. Another is music. And there's some interesting research also about priming for a happier state in the room. So if you put on some upbeat or more positive type of music when you're starting a meeting or type of working session, it's a really subtle, easy way to just start to prime people to be open and ready to move into that state of synchrony. So there's movement, music, and then setting up the shared task with a sense of purpose. It's getting everyone moving in the same direction toward the same objective together. And if you can do that on a practical level, so, these are the things we need to accomplish, but also on an emotional level, then you're also, attacking it from two levels. You have the pragmatic people are like, all right, I know like what I have to check off by the end of the session. And then you also get everybody in the same state of flow of like, by the end of this, we're going to achieve something really cool together. That we want to participate in and reach that objective.
I love this idea of priming. It is what in NLP we would call framing, pre-framing specifically. But you can pre-frame, reframe, and deframe. So in other words, you can change in multiple different ways or at different times of a space of a conversation of a process, how open we are to receiving information. And when you talk about priming, this sounds like a really specific way of doing that, where you're pre-framing subtly, as opposed to through a conversation. It's going to be through environment, basically. Actually, that's a good point. It sounds like what you're describing is the manipulation of environmental energy. Manipulation not being a bad word in this case, just the changing of it, right? So when I say environmental energy, I like to think about our energy going into or from multiple different like buckets. You got physical energy mental, emotional, social, environmental, and spiritual energy. And environmental is, does your environment give you energy or does it take away from it?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like what you're describing is like the intentional improvement of the environment to improve people's energy that they get from that environment.
Yeah.
That's only one of those 6 buckets, but the way you described it makes it sound really practical.
Yeah, it's a really easy thing. And of course, then later you have taste in music. Maybe somebody doesn't like this song or whatever,
Sure.
but it's just such a simple way to get people to start to be on the same page and to feel an uplift in the energy too.
Yeah. Do you, just in case you know anything about this, because I don't know if it's your area of like interest, but it's my area of interest, so I'm going to check.
Okay.
I often describe exactly what you're describing happening when I'm doing public speaking work with people, whether that's coaching or a workshop or whatever. What happens when you're in any room is people start to mirror, which is what the synchrony is, right? It's like people start to mirror each other naturally, unconsciously. I'm not just mirroring your body language, for example. I'm mirroring your energy. If you're really tense, if you're really down, if you're really happy, I start to pick that up from you. But when we're just in a crowd of people, it's quite subtle. When someone's on a stage, it gets magnified because now everyone's eyes are on that person, and where attention goes, energy flows. So all that attention is now on whoever's on the stage or whoever's giving the presentation or whatever. And what this has been shown to do is trigger those mirror neurons but it like seems to magnify them. So an audience will all start to sync up with the speaker, even though there's loads of other people around, because their attention is off those other people and it's on the speaker. And I'm wondering what your perspective is on how to, I guess, make use of that, the fact that that's happening. Is that what synchrony is, or is that something different? What's going on when someone's put on a pedestal almost, whether that's physically or metaphorically?
Well, I think that shared attention is part of what helps people to synchronize, because when you are focusing, so everyone's looking at the same person, they have the same stimuli around them, and that will help to start activate certain areas of the brain. So even if people aren't interacting with one another to synchronize, they are starting to synchronize because their focus is trained on the same
thing. Oh,
and that's from the person on the stage point of view. It's a lot of responsibility too, because then you are setting the tone for how other people in the audience are feeling. And they also start to relate to you. So if you come up and I have dealt with stage fright before, and it's not that you want to get up there and transmit nervous energy, but sometimes it's just part of the process. But when you can bring the type of energy that you want to facilitate into the room, it is contagious in a way. And there's a lot of power when everyone's trained their focus on one person. And you can, if you want the room to be more synchronized, you can use different techniques from a stage to also help to get them there. Even simple things as stand up, sit down, or getting people to cheer or to respond to things. But yeah, it can manipulate, so to speak, but not in a bad way, that sense of energetic flow. It can be in a bad way too. If somebody wants to manipulate it in a negative direction, they also could do that. So it's important, I think, to be quite intentional about it.
Why did you get so interested in all of this? Like, what is your story? What was your interest that brought you to go down this like world of applied neuroscience and why our brains care about each other?
Yeah. I think it's because I feel like the world is full of so much of the opposite, this feeling of dyssynchrony, a lot of tensions, a lot of polarization, and seeing that when I started to study, I decided to focus on, well, what are some ways we could tackle polarization? Is there anything we can do to try to soften these polarized tensions that we feel? And I don't even remember at what point I stumbled into synchrony. But because it's such a natural and innate thing for humans to do, I thought maybe this is something we could tap into in a very intentional way to help to soften those types of tensions.
I've never heard the word dyssynchrony before, but I guess it's a bit like how we have unity and disunity. You know, it's the word that comes to mind instead of dyssynchrony is just chaos. I guess I don't even know if that is the right word though, but it's like
Can be
whatever the opposite of synchronizing is, which is like everyone doing their own thing, I guess.
Yeah. And there can also be negative synchrony in a way.
Oh,
So there's dyssynchrony, which I don't know if you imagine like things on a table, you have things moving together. Then when it's dysynchronized, everybody's doing their own thing. But you can also seed hate and dissension, and then you can also synchronize people in opposite directions, which is what I think we see a lot with political parties.
Actually, that's what you mentioned, polarization. That is actually, to me, I'm thinking that's a little bit different because I'm very synchronized with the people in my bubble. I'm polarized, right?
Yes. And actually, at the brain level, one of the studies I looked into when I was researching is that the brains of people of the same political party are similar enough that scientists could identify their political party just by looking at brain scans while they were exposed to certain
What part of the brain do you know?
It's not one specific part. It's like the patterns of activity. Yeah, it's really interesting.
So what degree of accuracy do you remember?
I don't remember, but it was really high. And
yeah, this is so weird to me because our brains are so different. But what that means is that similar thoughts being processed and in a similar way, and enough of them that enough of your neurological like patterning or structure looks similar enough, like it's enough similarity that it starts to look like a pattern when it's macro enough.
And we're drawn to people with the same patterns.
We're drawn to people with the same brains, probably, right? Which means we're drawn to, which is why we start to polarize so much, because our brains want us to sync up with similar brains. Our brains want to sync up with other similar brains.
Yeah. So this whole
God, you just blown my mind. Okay.
I'll have to send you these. There are two really interesting studies. There's this one about political parties, and then there's another one where they studied the brains of college students as they were entering into university. And they followed the patterns, like their connection patterns. Who were they connected to? How many degrees of separation? And the students were automatically drawn and became friends with students who had similar brains to them from the beginning. So this idea of synchrony, it can work for us and it can work against us. And in the sense of forming tribes and forming collectives of people who can protect one another and achieve things together, this can be a very positive thing. But if you're trying to do any type of conflict intervention or get people with different types of brains to work on the same task together, you have to figure out, well, how do we synchronize when our brains naturally gravitate toward the people who are like us?
Can we also use synchrony to overcome this challenge?
Yes, but
how do you fire a fire?
Yeah, so that's where I was looking. Even though this tends to move us, potentially fueling polarization, can we harness that same biological imperative to want to synchronize, even when somebody is less like us? And I think that this study looking at the Israeli and Palestinian adolescents, it shows that by the end of that, there was a massive shift. And the thing about interventions is that up until now, you can do an intervention, but we don't have a whole lot of proof that they work. So you need longitudinal studies to see, well, we did all of these things and maybe they worked in the month or so after. So you can imagine these teenagers, they're getting together, kind of awkward at first, maybe tense. By the end of it, they've formed some friendships with people in the other group. And it's easy to walk out of that after the intervention's over and feel something more positive and show that you got a good result. But what happens when they go back into their families, into their cities where they're getting the same stimuli showing them that they should hate the other? So what these researchers did is they followed up 7 years later, and they did find that the people who originally had achieved more synchrony in the original study 7 years before had stronger attitudes toward peace building than those who had not synchronized. So it is possible to use it for the benefit of cross collaboration. And
Yeah, you'd have to consciously create such an environment. And
Yes.
the challenge we have is that you have to want to go into that environment or otherwise happen to, right? So let's say I'm a team leader at a workplace. I can consciously create an environment that I know is good for the synchronization of the brains that are in the room, and kind of ethically manipulate that room, so to speak, such that everyone can get better results, work together better, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're talking about deep conflict, all those people need to be open to their minds being changed.
Yes.
Almost,
Yeah.
right? So it's a very different context. Someone can't just go in and be like, let's all have a conversation. It's like, I don't want to talk to you. And then the whole thing just breaks down. Or less that it breaks down and that it never would have gone anywhere in the first place. So I wonder what would change is, like, when you look at global conflict, right, and things are only getting worse right this second, there isn't a way to really help people out of that by using what we're describing now, unless those people understand they need to want something different, I guess. I don't know. Like, what we're describing is a process, not an event that someone can make happen.
Mm-hmm. And it can take time, especially in the interventions I was looking at. They range from 30 seconds in duration to 8 weeks. So you can imagine the more conflict there is between people, the more time that they would need in order to reach this state of synchrony. But they have to show up, they have to choose to be in the same room. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the biggest barriers. The other thing is, I kept finding all these studies on synchronized drumming. I'm like, interesting. Which actually can really help to synchronize people. But you can't imagine, a UN gathering where they're like, all right, everyone, here's your bongo.
That would make the UN such a nice place. That would make it such a better place. But actually, I remember, like, an anecdotal story hearing from a friend of mine who teaches Tai Chi. Pre-COVID, the whole, class, they would all synchronize together. So, they do the movements all at once, and whatever these Tai Chi movements were, in perfect unity, and it would look like a beautiful piece of art with everyone doing all the moves in time together. And then COVID happened. The lessons went online, so everyone's learning on Zoom. Mm-hmm. Come back post-COVID, and people still knew all the moves, but they couldn't synchronize together. So it just, everyone was kind of doing the moves, but they just not in time. Like, they couldn't get it in time, and nothing worked. And it took months and months. Like, it wasn't a quick phase. It's not like, oh, we're not used to it anymore, but like in a week or two we'll be used to it again. It's like, no, it took ages. Ages and ages, because the brain started to have this new as the baseline. And I wonder if sometimes we struggle to understand why we should want this kind of synchronicity to take place, or this synchronization, to take place. Because, like, what I kind of asked you earlier is, like, what are the benefits of this? Mm-hmm. That can feel very prescriptive and top down. Better workplace culture, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, like, actually, like, you'll feel better and be happier. But I'm happy as I am. Yeah.
But could you be happier?
Maybe. Or maybe you think you're happy and you're not. Mm-hmm. Maybe you feel disconnected, but you don't know any better. Maybe it's a case of, like, the devil I know is better than the devil I don't, because it's hard to do what we're describing, mm-hmm. right? It's really uncomfortable to build relationships with people that we don't like or that we think we don't like.
Mm-hmm. I think, so from a personal perspective, why should you want this? There is a lot of research that shows the more we synchronize people, the more joy we'll find in our day-to-day. From a showing up to work point of view, you spend a lot of time in your life working? Do you want to show up and feel a little bit better in here every day than you would otherwise? I mean, why not? I think that we should enjoy as much as possible the time we spend at work, because we really give a lot of time, our lives, to that. So why would we not want that sense of a little more joy, a little more fulfillment?
I do make this argument actually like quite often, where I'm thinking, people want to work from home as much as possible. Some people do. And the challenge I have with that is it means we're all operating our own little bubbles instead of having our community to get to the workplace. Why is that important? I'm just here to work. Well, actually, that's 40 hours a week of your life, almost every week of the year. That's a lot of your life. So it's a lot of time to be not spending with other people, not building relationships.
That being said, you can design for more relationship building and more synchrony in a remote environment.
Okay, what have you learned about that? Because I maintain that it's always weaker when it's remote. And not.
I think it's much more challenging.
Okay.
But you can first give people the space and freedom and encourage them to connect on a more personal level. So allow for catch-ups. If you think about when you're in an office environment, you have these moments when people are connecting just organically because they're in the same room together. You might have to engineer a little bit more for that in a remote environment, but you can do it. Another thing is forming some type of ritual that you all share, which can vary from one culture to the next. It depends on what you're doing in the company. But if you can find things that you share as rituals together, that can help. Another example would be anytime you start a group call, take 5 minutes for just a quick catch up to see how people in the room are doing. But you have to choose to do these things. And some companies might see it as a cost. It's like, well, if I'm using up this time, I'm paying for time, and we're using it just chatting about our weekends, we're losing money in that way. But if it facilitates better flow and more collaboration, then in the end, you're making up for that in efficiency.
And your background before getting into all this was journalism, right? Am I misremembering that?
I studied journalism, yeah. And I started with psychology because I love knowing how people tick and like, why do we do what we do? And then I got seduced by creative writing and journalism, and I switched my studies. And I had a short stint at a magazine, and what I wanted to do was tell stories about people and places. And just be able to have these interview moments. Like, it's all about being able to sit down and connect with somebody and hear what is their story and why do they do what they do. So yeah, that was my background, but I didn't actually go into the path of media journalism.
So I'm wondering how the experience you've had working in and around people, as you've just described, how you see it now that you understand more about how our brains work together. Has your view on life changed at all or anything? I don't know.
I mean, of course, that was a long time ago. We all grow and change. I think that I've almost come back to it more, though. If I think about where I was back then and the energy I had for it, and when I was choosing what to study and what kind of career that I wanted, I was really focused on this sense of connecting with people. And as time passed, I got in my own bubble. And I got very comfortable. And I think that that's where the pitter-patter of the heart started to happen for me, where I was so used to being in my own quiet, like soft space with comfortable people who I love and who know me well. It's easy to operate there. And I have been pushing myself to move out of that and refinding the joy in these moments of connecting like I had 20 years ago. So it's almost like a full cycle thing, which I don't know what that'll look like, if you look 20 more years down the road. But yeah, it's been a process.
Because I think, you're obviously drawn to an interest in people and how people work. And I can imagine if you're telling stories about people and then you go learn that I guess it almost feels to me like so much of our stories, whether it's physically what happens to us or what we did, or the narrative we tell, which isn't always the same thing, so much of that story is a result of or dictated by the way our brains are working or not working. And we're social beings, so much of that is how our brains are working together or not together, synchronously or asynchronously, with other brains, with other people. How much of our lives are dictated by whatever habits we get into when it comes to the way we operate as a social being.
Yeah. Well, and it comes back to what we started with, this realization that so many people are choosing not to do that these days. It's really it's isolating ourselves. And what will that look like if down the road we continue to choose more in that direction? Will we lose our ability to connect? And what will happen at a societal level if we fall even more out of sync with each other?
What do you think will happen or would happen? Because you've talked about empathy when this improves. So will empathy get worse or other things?
If you're not connecting with people and empathizing, empathy is almost like a muscle. It's something you can train. So if you stop interacting altogether, I think it would be harder to empathize with people. And at a large scale, I don't like to imagine the consequences of that. I think the coldness that you mentioned earlier would probably feel a lot colder.
And there's a word that I don't think we actually have used very much today, but we've spoken about briefly before, which is resonance. What does resonance mean? Where does it come into this equation that we've been describing of all these things going on?
And resonance in what kind of context?
Whatever context is most relevant to this conversation.
I mean, when I think of resonance, I think of something that moves us on an emotional level. And if something is resonating for a group in the same way, feeling that sense of collective belonging through the resonance that we're experiencing together, it's a special feeling. And if we were to lose that, I don't know, I think you lose a little bit of the magic in life too.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think life is full of magic moments, right? And then you need to be in the moment with the magic in the moment and create some magic too. And a lot of that is serendipity. It's the synchronicities, right? Yeah. We never actually clarified, but it's the, as opposed to the events that seem like coincidences, those synchronicities. Synchrony is different brains syncing up with each other. Anyway, that was just a clarification point. But it's those synchronicities, those events that take place that we're like, ooh, that was a nice surprise.
Yeah.
Because that's what makes life it's the opposite of the dreary day to day, right? That's why like the same routine, this is so boring. That's why people like are almost afraid of their life being on autopilot, I think, because it's the opposite of that magic. I've been thinking about this like psychological resonance, and I've been looking a bit into as part of like the trail end of this rabbit hole of looking into synchrony, is like psychological resonance. So when enough people's thoughts, energy, emotions, whatever, are all resonating at the same level, that you get enhanced flow. So almost when you talk about group flow, right? When everyone is in that brainstorming meeting together, or that saying that you are the amalgamation of like the 5 people you spend the most time with, or if everyone is vibrating at a similar level, we all get the energy of other people as well as ourselves. And then if there are enough other people there, that makes us more excited. So if I'm excited on my own, or I'm excited in a room full of other excited people, the excitement levels are so much higher when I'm with other people. I think about like group meditation exercises, right? So someone like a Dr. Joe Dispenza, where he's getting literally thousands of people together to meditate at once. And the results are measurably so much better than when you meditate alone or something like that. When we're all resonating together and more resonance is taking place, it almost feels like energy is bouncing off and magnifying the existing positive, or actually, as you said, sometimes negative energy, and takes it even more extremely and even more quickly in whatever direction it was already going in. We all know that if literally everyone on planet Earth wanted world peace tomorrow, we would have world peace tomorrow. But there's just enough disunity and therefore a lack of resonant energy all going in the same direction.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I guess it's more of a thought than a question. How do we move more in this direction of this? What do you think about synchrony and resonance?
I think that there's a direct relationship, because if you synchronize, you will resonate more.
Become more resonant.
Yeah, you become more resonant. And it depends also on what are you trying to achieve with that. But I think that emotional resonance and psychological resonance can also work they work together. Like if you start to resonate more, you'll start to synchronize more. If you start to synchronize more, you'll start to resonate more. So there is this build up on the way that helps them work together, for sure.
What's the most important thing that we haven't talked about today?
Oh, I don't know.
Is there any message left you want to leave people with, or any final bit of learning, or even just a question people need to ask themselves?
I think, if this is something that is resonating with people, and this idea that synchrony can help move us toward a bit kinder of a world, or a bit more peaceful of a world. It's not something that, we're going to achieve world peace tomorrow, or we're going to get rid of polarization tomorrow. The reality is that as individuals, we're all moved by our own aspirations and our own fears. And our way of resolving those things might be different. And I think that's why a lot of polarization happens, because maybe we're all afraid of insecurity or a lack of safety. But my way to solve feeling safe might be different from this other person's way to solve feeling safe. So having more empathy, choosing to synchronize more, it can help us to better understand the world we're operating in. And I think it can help us to experience more satisfaction in our own day-to-day. So really, all that to say, it starts with us. It starts with choosing to have those little one-on-one moments throughout our day. And I think that the sum of those interactions has a cumulative effect in us as individuals, but it has a ripple effect also in the people that we're synchronizing with along the way.
I love that. We unconsciously impact other people for the better. Right. Little bits of, it's like paying it forward, or it's the cliche of like, be nice to the cashier, or smile at the person who's walking past, just to spread some like joy. And actually, the neuroscience says that does have a tangible impact. It's not just for the good vibes, although it is also literally good vibes.
Exactly.
It's scientifically good vibes. I love that.
Yeah.
The show is called Lost in Searching. And so my final question for everyone who comes on the show, what is the number one thing that you are currently searching for the answer to? The number one question you are currently searching for the answer to in your life?
In my whole life. All of this, how can I help people to synchronize more? But what I'm looking for is, what are the tangible ways to actually do that? So I don't know exactly where this will lead me. I don't know if it'll lead me to trying to design interventions, or if it'll just lead me to thinking about my own everyday interactions in a deeper way. But what I'm searching for is, how can we soften some of these tensions that we see in the world, and how to empower people to do that in a way that feels just very real and very natural and attainable in their day-to-day life.
What answer have you come to so far? Where have you gotten to with that? Where do you think you'll go with it?
I have a lot of research left to do.
Really?
Yeah, that's one thing. So on one side, it feels like, there's so much to learn. There's so much that we don't know yet as a collective, and there's so much I don't know yet as an individual. So there's a lot left for me to learn. But the other answer to that is, well, just start now with what I already know.
Yeah, because there's always going to be more to learn, right?
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's two-pronged. keep searching. I think that feeling lost is okay sometimes, and searching is just part of our journey of growth. So that will continue. I don't think that there will ever be a moment of arriving for me in that regard. But I don't want that to mean that I'm flailing about. I can be lost in searching while I'm also very intentional about my day-to-day.
Well, the unconscious part of the brain does a lot of our processing for us, right? Sometimes we can just ask ourselves a question and then get on with life. and then we'll have a literal shower thought, which will, and where the answer will come, because our subconscious has been doing the processing. And sometimes we sit there, we try to figure out exactly what's the answer, and there's actually just kind of getting on with life tends to reveal the answer.
Yeah. Just keep going.
Yeah, I love that. Megan, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really cool. I love these like semi-philosophical, really scientific, figuring out how the brain works and why I love it. Because similar to yourself, I'm also trying to figure out how we can apply things we learn about the brain to improve these spaces, right? I love facilitating spaces and conversations and being able to go into rooms and know that I can understand what the brain needs and therefore create a more useful space and therefore create better results. I just love it. So thank you so much for exploring this with me. It's been really cool.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Well, look at you making it to the end of the episode. Welcome. There's a lot more for you to do. If you're still here, there's a full playlist on YouTube down below. There's a recommended video probably somewhere around the screen or down below, and so much more. Give us a follow. Help share if you're here. Hey, maybe you enjoyed it. And look, this show only grows with your help. So again, I know you're probably bored of hearing it, but it would mean the world to me if you help us out and paid it forward and shared it around. And hey, you never know how this will help someone else. So thank you so much for being here, for being a part of it. Lots of love, and here is to your success. See you soon.